Okay, so we're looking at the second parak in the Talmud Devorah, and the issue is describing the Sphira of Keser as the head of Hashem, because remember the different spheros are arranged as if they were a body, and we're then subdividing the various components of the head to identify midos that we emulate Keser, and therefore that causes that divine influence to come into the world. So, one second. So, the first thing, the first thing was the Rosh as a whole represents humility. Then we looked at the thought. The Machshava as a whole means thinking only of good, meaning you look at the world and you think of good. Now, it's a little ambiguous. In other words, the Talmud Devorah says, the Ramak says, that Machshavto, this is the second level, Machshavto tidme l'machshaves hakeser. One should endeavor to make their thoughts analogous, comparable to the thoughts within Keser. Kamo sha'oso chachma leitifsek tamid lachshav machshavas tayvais. Just as the wisdom within Keser never ceases to think good thoughts, Hara lo yikanesba, evil does not enter Keser, b'bnei shehi rachamim gemurim, because it's complete rachamim. Now again, the truth of the matter is, there's so much terminology here that you kind of have to untangle. Remember, there's a separate sphere of chachma, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the chachma within Keser, and although rachamim also has a technical term, which is the mizug, between Chesed and Devorah, the Ramak is not using it that way. Here, the basic idea, without repeating everything we did last week, was that on the level of Keser, which is God's divine thoughts, there is not yet a differentiation between Chesed and Din. Chesed and Din are simply two different manifestations of God's underlying good. In the case of Chesed, I see the good in an obvious way. In the case of Din or Gevurah, it is covered up in a mask, which seems to suggest punishment. But in terms of Hashem's machshava, what is God's mind? God's mind is kulo tov. So too, so now we go on the emulation part. Kacha adam tamid tia machshavto penuya mikol davar mechuar. Man's thought should be panoi, should be vacated, emptied from anything that is ugly. Now the reason why I think there's a little bit of an ambiguity here is, are we talking about that your mind should always be preoccupied with wanting to help people? Is that what he means? And there should be no selfishness or egotism? Or is tov used in a broader sense? Tov is not only chesed, but it means your mind should be occupied with what you might call noble thoughts. That would be Torah learning. That would be thinking about how to perfect yourself, how to be a better person. Meaning, I think there may be a little bit of a shift here. Meaning, when he was describing the Tov of God, he was referring to the fact that God's machshava is only to be native. When he then puts it down to us, it actually has a bit of a broader connotation. It's not just a question of native, but even the word mechur is very interesting. Don't let ugly things be in your mind. Mechur means ugly. That's a little bit of a different nuance. It's not the nuance of always be thinking of others. It's the nuance that I should keep my mind pure and good and noble. I think that's the issue. Right? People say, what's wrong if I go to a movie? What's wrong if, pornography? I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not doing anything to anybody. Right? It's a victimless crime, so to speak. But here the point is, no, you want to keep your mind focused only on those things that are good. I mean, the point, okay, maybe I'm stretching here. I'm just making the point that I think there are two different usages of the word tov. With respect to God, it's referring to the benevolence of God. But I think the Ramak is making a point that you have to keep your mind pure. Your mind should only be focused on thoughts that are good and noble. This even comes to the forefront with respect to music, an interesting point. People ask a lot about music, listening to non-Jewish music, or not. Really, it's not even an issue of non-Jewish music. It's an issue of certain types of music. Rav Mendel Kaplan, who was a great Rosh Hashiva, he was actually Rabbi Beryl Wine's Rebbe. He was a Rebbe. Rav Mendel Kaplan was a Talmud of Rav Elchanan Wasserman in Europe, and then for many years he was a Rebbe in the Philadelphia Yeshiva. One of the great, people who are older remember Rav Mendel Kaplan. I think there's even an Art Scroll biography of Rav Mendel Kaplan. So he was a great Talmud Chacham. He also was a winemaker. It's interesting. At various times in his life, he tried to make forays into making kosher wine. I think he got bankrupt in that particular endeavor. But Rav Mendel Kaplan loved to listen to classical music. So he listened to Beethoven, to Bach, to Mozart, all of these guys. And somebody said, they're Goyim, when you listen to Goyish music. So he said, there is no difference between music of a Jewish person and music of a non-Jewish person. That's not the issue. The issue is not Goyish music versus Jewish music. The issue is, what type of emotions does the music elicit from you? And that is, music is very, very powerful, right? The Vilna Gaon says that the gates in heaven of Nigun are very close to the gates of wisdom and the gates of prayer. Music is extremely powerful. And music can elicit emotions that are noble, devotion, courage, hope, strength, resilience. Or it can elicit emotions that are very debased, sexuality and whatever it would be. So he says a person should only listen to music that brings out within a person noble emotions, which means it's not a Jew versus Goy type of thing. In fact, there's a lot of so-called Jewish music that goes with rock beats, with rap beats and the like, which kind of play to the animalistic part. Now, I know this is very subjective, so I'm not giving you I'm absolutely not giving you psak halachas here at all, but just the general idea that you want to be careful about even the emotions that are elicited within you, because they impact on your mind, they impact on the way you think, on the way you look at the world, the way you feel. And therefore, the Ramak is saying one has to guard that, meaning it's not enough to be virtuous in action. Just because a person says, I don't commit any sins, I do my, pornography for an hour a week and I'm perfect afterwards. Well, that's a milah too. I'm not putting down the person who is like totally perfect the rest of the week. But there is a notion that the mind itself should be pure, and that is how we emulate the midah of Keser, where Hashem's machshava is always in a state of purity. So then somebody asked Rabbi Kaplan an interesting follow-up question. He says, well, listen, number one, a lot of these composers, Bach was a very devout, they all were Christian. In fact, even the Jewish composers wound up being Christian. Felix Mendelssohn, whatever it is. But Bach was a very devout Christian, and in fact his music was written for Yashka and everything else. But then, that's one issue. And the second issue is that some of the musicians, or some of the composers, were not personally very moral. Beethoven. Now, Bach actually happened to be a good family man, faithful in his marriage, a lot of kids, that was Bach. But, Beethoven, Mozart, they were kind of, loose in their moral code. So Rabbi Kaplan said, that may be true, but they put into the music the nobility of their character. Now, I'm not sure how that's a teretz for Bach. Yeah, Bach was noble, but he put into the music, his adoration of Yashka. That's an interesting question. But putting that issue aside, he said that even a person who's flawed has aspects of his character that are noble and good, and the fact that the music elicits those types of feelings means this is coming from the goodness of his character. One can imagine that. One can easily be an artist who personally has Yetzer Haras, personally has Taivas, personally has all sorts of chesronos, but their nobility can be directed into their art. In fact, the truth of the matter is, it can even exist, within a teacher or a rabbi or whatever it is, in which a person may have tremendous Yetzer Haras, but whatever it is, when they teach Torah, perhaps they're bringing out the good things. That's very. Again, these are difficult issues, and I think you would need a gadol like Rav Kaplan to be able to make those decisions. But that's what he said. He said that Beethoven and Mozart, whatever was noble within them, they put into the music, even if in their lives they were not able to live up to that. So I'm just bringing this in because this is the notion of trying to keep your thoughts pure and focused on good and noble things, and not things that are debased. Yeah.
So presumably Kester doesn't exclude things from itself that we would regard as evil, right? It's not like the snake doesn't exist inside of Kester. Kester sees everything in reality. It just sees the proper toelis in it and has the proper craving on it, that it knows that how it really serves for the good. So I guess the responsibility to have good thoughts, that doesn't mean we should drive away someone who's dealing with something bad or that they're struggling. It's you're going to sully my mind. We just have to, there might be toelis to have thoughts which are not obviously pure, and that seems to be something that Kester also seems to do.
Yeah, now remember, when you think about Perek Sheni, you got to remember Perek Rishon. Now, Perek Rishon was all about not driving away evil, meaning I'm dealing with difficult people, I don't simply get rid of them, I don't simply remove myself. I deal with them and I try to uncover the hidden goodness that may be within the evil. So that exactly, in many ways, was the whole theme of the Yud Gimel Midos of Rachamim, at least one of the themes of the Yud Gimel Midos. So you are correct. Keser does not mean living a life of denial, but it means that you try to always focus your mind on that which is good. But again, as I say, there's a little ambiguity here. In other words, are we talking about purity of thought? Are we talking about benevolence? Yes, we're talking about both, really, but they are two different aspects of this. In fact, this reminds me a little bit, although I'm not sure if the Ramak is saying it here, of a very, very beautiful Hezber, again from Ephraim Shmulevitz. Pirkei Avos says, Havidan eskal adam Lechaf Zechus. Judge everybody favorably. And most people understand, the Pashut Pshat is, give people the benefit of the doubt. I see a religious Jew stop at a McDonald's. I don't mean in a Mavaseret McDonald's that has at least a Rabbanah Asher, but stops at a treif McDonald's. I am mechuyev to assume that they're going to the bathroom or they're getting a Coke or whatever it would be. I judge people favorably. I give them the benefit of the doubt. In fact, Rabbi Samet's wife, Rebbetzin Samet, wrote a whole book in English called The Other Side of the Story, which are so many different stories in which it looked like somebody was doing something bad, but if you really thought about it and gave them the benefit of the doubt, it turned out that you were always wrong. Right? So again, give people the benefit of the doubt is a well-known idea. But here's the problem. In Avos de Rabbi Nosson, by the way, everyone knows what Avos de Rabbi Nosson is? Let me just give a little word of explanation. Pirkei Avos, okay, so let me show this. Pirkei Avos is a Maseches of Mishnah. It's in the Mishnah. It was compiled, like all of the Mishnah, by Rav Yehuda Hanasi, but it's a little, even in Pirkei Avos, there's something a little strange. The first 5 prakim are Mishnayos Mamish. The 6th parak of Pirkei Avos is actually a long brisa that was after the Mishnah that was added to the Mishnah, and indeed it begins Shanu Chachamim B'Lashon HaMishnah. The Chachamim taught certain teachings in the style of the Mishnah. So Pirkei Avos is 5 prakim of Mishnayos with one long brisa, which is the 6th parak of Pirkei Avos. Now, Avos of Rabbi Nosson is supposedly a commentary by Tanoim on the Tanoim and Amoram on the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. So, for example, Pirkei Avos is 5 or 6 prakim. Avos to Rabbi Nosson is more than 40 prakim. And it elaborates and illustrates Pirkei Avos, but it does so by giving a huge amount of extra material. So you can find Avos to Rabbi Nosson in the typical Vilna Shas, it's printed after Maseches Avodah Zarah. So after Maseches Avodah Zarah, you'll see Avos, Pirkei Avos, and after Avos, you'll see Avos to Rabbi Nosson. Okay? So Avos Rabbi Nosson is a commentary on Pirkei Avos, but it's a commentary of the Tanoim and the Amoraim itself on the teachings of Pirkei Avos. So it's not a commentary by Rishonim. We have that also. But this is a commentary of the Tanoim and Amoraim on Avos to Rabbi Nosson. So Avos, and that's why it's a little hard to find, because if Avos to Rabbi Nosson is more than 40 prakim, so that would mean, every parak of Pirkei Avos has like five prakim or whatever it would be. So in Avos to Rabbi Nosson, it says the following peculiarity: it is important to judge people Lechaf Zechus, because if you judge people Lechaf Zechus, God will judge you Lechaf Zechus. Mida keneged mida. I judge people favorably, God will judge me favorably. So frekt Rav Chaim Shmulevitz asks the obvious question: if judging people Lechaf Zechus means giving people the benefit of the doubt, God does not have any doubt. What do you mean? In other words, I see you going into a McDonald's, and I know that you generally keep kosher. So instead of my suspecting you of all of a sudden deciding to eat treif, I must give you the benefit that you want to use the bathroom. Meaning, if I'm in doubt, I got to resolve it in your favor. So what are you saying? So the same way that when you go into the McDonald's, I say you're going to the bathroom. So when Hashem sees me going to the McDonald's, he'll assume I'm going into the bathroom. That makes no sense. Hashem knows one way or the other. Either I am or I'm not. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows. So what's shayach? What is possible to say Hashem gives me the benefit of the doubt? There is no doubt to which Hashem gives me a benefit. It's a very, very good question. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz is Mechadesh. Again, this is a very, very, like once you hear it, it's almost like an obvious pshat, that judging Lechaf Zechus does not only mean giving people the benefit of the doubt. It does mean that, it includes that. But there's all sorts of other ways that you judge people favorably. And that is, he said, ever since Adam HaRishon ate from the fruit of the Eitz Hadas. What is Eitz Hadas? Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra. The tree of knowledge that contains good and evil. The nature of that is every single action that we do is no longer pure evil or pure good. Everything that we do is a mixture of good and evil. In our good, there is evil, and in our evil, there may even be some good. How does that so? In my good, there is evil. I daven, I learn, that's good. But in my davening, my mind wanders, I don't have proper kavanah. In my learning, I'm a vatel, whatever it would be. So in my toiv, there is ra. Right? Nobody is 100%. I mean, maybe some great gedolim tzaddikim, but on our level, in our good, there are going to be some negatives within our good. Now, the Chazon Ish warned us not to be overly focused on that, because then you get depressed, and don't constantly go over my mincha. I didn't but in our good there's negatives, and in our negatives there may be some mitigating circumstances that, Hashem understands our pressures, our stresses. Maybe the way we suffered, which causes us to behave a certain way. Remember the Tomer Devorah, the last midah, that you look at a person and you kind of look at the way they were, all the way back, and what happened to them. I think I may have told you the story before. Many, many years ago, in the 1980s, I was involved with NCSY, the youth organization, and Motzei Shabbos was true confession. They have a kumsitz, it's a whole dramatic thing. They perfected it. I think they still do it, probably, in which the room is dark and it's lit by candles, and people get up and they tell their stories. And some of them are very heartbreaking or inspirational. So I remember there was a 14-year-old girl who got up And not only were her parents not Shomer Shabbos, but her parents were very, very against her keeping Shabbos. Ad kedei kach that they did not allow her to keep Shabbos in their home when she lived at home. So what she did was, every Friday night, she would wait until her parents went to sleep at, let's say, 11:30, and she would then get Shabbos candles in a secret hiding place. She would light them. This is Friday night. It's Shabbos. She would light them in the bathroom with a bracha. She would then blow them out. She would hide them, and she would turn on the bathroom fan so there would be no smell of smoke. Now, you could give, if I were giving you a bechina for smicha, rabbinic ordination, I could ask you, how many sins were committed in the course of this action? Right? Aveira after Aveira, malachos and making brachos in the bath, a million Aveiras. So, you might look at that as ra, bad. But look at the good in the bad, right? Just like there's bad in our good, there's good in our bad. How much she wanted to keep Shabbos, how much she yearned to do mitzvahs. Do you think Hashem doesn't pay attention to that? Again, not that we would ever tell a person to do it if she asked the shaila, but it counts for something. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said it is the nature of the human condition that in our good there is much evil, and even in our sin there is some good. This is the meaning of Eitz Hadas Yodea Toivara. So when I look at a person, it's not a question of being ignorant. In other words, let's say I know what the person is doing. I know what he's doing. I know he's eating treif. But what do I choose to focus on? Do I choose to focus on the positives? Or do I choose to focus on the negatives? Both are true. Both are true. But what you focus on is what Hashem will focus on you. You see, so Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said, if I focus on the positives within a person, Hashem will focus on the positives within me. Right? That's an aspect of Kesser as well, that Kesser only focuses, right? So there are three ideas here. There is the idea of benevolence, there's the idea of purity, and there's the idea of focus, that God focuses on the good. There is a Gemara in Shabbos that says, based on a drasha and a pasuk in Iyov, that if there are 999 angels in Shemayim that say a person is undeserving, and there's one angel out of 1,000 that says the person is worthy, and even within that one angel out of 1,000, 999 parts of that angel say the person is not deserving, and it's only 1,000th of an angel that is one out of 1,000 that says the person is deserving, Hashem says, that's enough for me. Matzasi kofer. We actually say this pasuk, if you do kaparas, Erev Yom Kippur, whether you use a chicken or whether you use money, whichever way you do it, you recite some psukim. So this is one of the psukim. Yim yesh malach echad minei alef. If there's one angel out of 1,000, lahagid li'adam yashrei, to declare that a person is upright. Hashem says, Yechunenu, have compassion on him. Matzasi kofer, I have found a ransom. I have found a redemption. I have found an atonement. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu focuses on the good. That doesn't mean there's no accountability, but Hashem focuses on the good. So Chazal are saying a beautiful thing. If you judge people favorably by focusing on the good, then you will be zocha, that Hashem will look at you the same way, right? That's a wonderful thing. And that's also an aspect of Keser, in which there's a focus on the good. Now, we're often the opposite. A person could have 999 positive qualities and one negative, and we notice the negative. We notice the negative right away. Like that's the old story of Jewish parents. A child comes home with 10 A's and 1 A minus, or whatever it will be, or whatever, or a 99 on the test. Why not 100? Why not? Why'd you get an A minus? Whatever. I'm not being biographical. They're just using a mushal. This is now again. I mean, there are reasons why that became a stereotype of the Jewish parent, and that's why, Yidden, even in a secular way, achieved a lot of success because they were driven that way. But still, the concept is you got to focus on the positive. Focus on the positive. And so again, I'm saying this as yet another aspect in the machshava of Keser is focused on the good and the noble in terms of Hashem's benevolence, in terms of noble thoughts, and in terms of focusing in people on that which is good within them. Of course, there's a Gemara in Bava Metzia that says a fascinating thing, and a very, very interesting story, how focusing on good can actually become a self-fulfilling prophecy in human relations. The Gemara gives a story, I think it involved Rav Yehuda Hanassi, Rebbe, who in the aftermath, remember Rebbe lived shortly after Bar Kokhba, and things were very turbulent. Many, many kids were orphaned, they lost their parents, and they were begging in the street. And Rebbe was looking for the son of one of the great, great Tanoim who died, who was killed. And he was told that this son became a male prostitute, that in order to survive, he would hire himself out to Romans, homosexual, and the like, very, very debased. And Rebbe took him in. Rebbe found him, took him in, supported him, learned Torah with him, and at some points he said, I'm giving you a shir, I'm making you a Rosh Hashiva. We don't know exactly how old the kid was. The kid says, a Rosh Hashiva. He says, I'm a prostitute. Like every day he wanted to go back to the street. That was the life he was used to. So Rebbe said, well, it doesn't look good for a Rosh Hashiva to be a prostitute. I mean, listen, you're going to have to stay here because, how can a Rosh Hashiva? In other words, basically the concept was, Rebbe said, you're too good for that. You're too good for that. A Rosh Hashiva can't be a prostitute. And eventually the story goes that he became a great, great Talmid Chacham because somebody believed in him. Rebbe believed in him. Rebbe said, you're not this bum. There is potential here. There's godless here. And when a person feels that somebody sees the good that's within them, that good actually comes out. This is the idea of perception becomes a reality. We might think it's naive to look at people and see all this good stuff when the guy's a bum. But no, there really is something. And when somebody can validate it, somebody can see it, somebody can identify it, it becomes a reality. Perceptions become reality. The way we view people is the way they become. The Kutzker Rebbe has a famous for it the other way. It's a very, very famous idea that your own negative self-perception becomes your reality. If you remember when the Meraglim came back from their report, and from Eretz Yisrael rather, from their spying mission, and they gave this negative report. So they discuss how tall and gigantic the Canaanites were. So their language was, we were in our eyes like grasshoppers, and so we were in their eyes. This is the lesson of the pasuk. V'niya be'einenu kechagavim. We were in our own eyes as grasshoppers. V'chein hayinu b'eineihem. And so we were in their eyes. So the Kutzker Rebbe says, beautiful thought. It starts with you. If you look at yourself as an insignificant grasshopper, that is how you will be viewed. If you looked at yourself as a person of dignity and stature, then einochinami, that's how other people will view you. So it works in both ways, meaning to say my self-image, in a sense, will be my reality, but if someone can help me redefine my self-image, then my reality itself changes. This is what Rebbe did with this boy. And the Talmud Devorah is saying this is how, the Rav Chaim Shmulevitz is saying, and this is how when we judge people at Kaf Zechus, the good qualities actually come out. They're actually actualized through the process of being identified and being recognized. And back to the Talmud Devorah, this is going back to the Midah of Keser, in which we try to keep our minds only focused on that which is good and noble. Okay, so this is defining the machshava. Now we're subdividing the head. Remember, Keser as a whole is called the head. And the next thing is mitzchay. Right? We're going down. Meitzach is forehead. So the head of Keser, in a spiritual sense, has a forehead. So what does a forehead represent? So this is interesting. It's hard to know exactly what the image is, but let me just call to your attention an expression from the Yom Kippur Vidui. Right? On Yom Kippur, for every service except Ne'ilah, we have a long Vidui of Al Chet. Ne'ilah does not have the Al Chet, right? Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha, Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha. It's a double Aleph base, right? There are two sins of Aleph, Aleph, base, base, Gimel, Gimel, etc. So in the ayin, one of the ayin says, Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha, we ask Hashem forgiveness for the sin that we committed, bi azus meitzach, with the, now just literal, with the arrogance of the forehead. Meitzach is the forehead. What exactly is that picture? Like, what is arrogance? I mean, your forehead does not have its own brain. I mean, your forehead is not arrogant, so to speak. But again, apparently, the idea is that the Meitzach was symbolic of what you might call, maybe not so much arrogance, but stubbornness, just like we say by the neck. Now, the Torah uses the image of the neck as stubborn. Right? We are called Am Kishei Orif. We are a stiff-necked people, meaning we can't be bent. We can't be bent. We have a position. Kishei Orif is a wonderful quality and a very negative quality, meaning Jews are stubborn. That's what the Chumash says. We are a stubborn people. Now, the stubbornness in many ways has served us very, very well. That's how we survive more than 2,000 years of people trying to kill us. You got to be kind of stubborn. You don't roll over. Otherwise, you're just dead. On the other hand, Kishei Orif also means that we sometimes were resistant to God's messages. We didn't listen to the Nevi'im. We wanted to do something, we did it, even though Hashem told us not to do it. This is a classic example of a midah that can be used in a very good way, and a midah that can be used in a very, very bad way. And we've done both. We've used it for good, we've used it for bad. Now, apparently, the idea of so just as the neck is kind of a symbolic expression of stubbornness, Kishei Orif. In fact, does he cover the neck? It's interesting. The neck is not in his list. I guess the neck is not part of the head in that way. He doesn't discuss that. But here he says, the Meitzach seems to also be a certain stubbornness, meaning for some reason the imagery switches a little bit, that instead of focusing on neck, we focus on the forehead, as if you stick your head out and, no matter what happens, you move ahead, right? So Meitzach is an image of stubbornness. Again, it's a little ha'ara. Why does he move from the Torah's use of the neck, the back of the neck, as akshanut, and now instead we look at the Meitzach. But that's azus Meitzach, the arrogance of the forehead that has to have his way no matter what. And he says that the Meitzach of Keser is willing, so to speak, to be conciliatory, to accept people. And therefore, even if people are doing things that make me angry, instead of my responding in anger, I try to calm them down. I try to take away their anger, right? We all know, all of us know in life that anger begets anger, right? It's always the situation. Somebody is angry at me, I feel attacked, so I get myself into a fight response in which, I yell back, I scream back. But the midah of Keser is that even if someone acts bakas against me, I try to calm them down. I try to see their viewpoint, to be mashkit, and that is called the softening of the Meitzach. Meaning, if Azus Meitzach literally means the strengthening of the forehead, again using that imagery, so this is Rakus. Rakus is Reish Chaf Vav Saf, a softening of the forehead, meaning that even when people are expressing anger, I try to calm them down. Now, within Hashem, the way this works is, again, it's Kabbalistic, and that is Keser, which ultimately will come down to, it'll branch off to Chesed and Gevurah. So we say the powers of Keser mitigate, sweeten, soften, modify the kochos of Gevurah that are seeking full steam ahead, different attributes of retribution and punishment. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Keser, the Meitzach is like the mechanism, so I'm going to use some Kabbalistic words. The Meitzach is the mechanism that's mamtik. Mamtik literally means sweetening. Mamtik es hagvurot. Right? That within God there is a notion that the Midas Adin has to be sweetened and modified. Now, I have to admit that there seems to be a little bit of a contradictory view of how Gevurah works. Because on one hand, we said before that Gevurah is disguised chesed. It's chesed that is encased within an externality of punishment. Here, there seems to be a slightly different nuance. Gevurah seeks full punishment, but it gets sweetened with infusions of chesed through keser. In other words, instead of looking at Gevurah as a mask that covers chesed, it's looking at chesed as an infusion into Gevurah that softens Gevurah. Which implies, in other words, that Gevurah has a certain autonomous existence that is mitigated within Keser, so by the time it comes out as Gevurah, it's already been sweetened. So even though Chesed and Gevurah have two different paths, but the Gevurah that emerges is sweetened with the Meitzach of Keser. Again, I'm not sure if I know what I'm talking about here, but I apologize. But it seems that there are maybe two different images, and in Kabbalah that's very, very, very common, because you're dealing with such a complex reality that is beyond human comprehension, that it is often described in almost contradictory ways because it's reflecting different aspects of it. There is the notion that Gevurah is disguised chesed, and there is the notion that the Gevuros are sweetened with infusions of chesed. So by the time it comes out, it's no longer a pure Gevurah that would be destructive and the like. So that is how we talk about the notion of Meitzach. The Meitzach is, even when I would have a desire to retaliate, it gets modified, mitigated, sweetened by chasadim and the like. And the way I emulate it is trying to be that type of person, to try to be that type of person. It's interesting. I mean, if you read stories about Gedolim, you will often see this, that there were times that people would yell at them. They would be mavaza them. They would say things that were totally disrespectful, totally awful. I mean, they would be insulting to any person. Kal v'chomer, Gadol and a tzaddik. And when people would try to intervene and shut up this person, the Gadol would sometimes say, listen, the person is suffering, the person is going through a difficult time, and maybe we should try to understand what's bothering them. Instead of trying to just shut them up and, saying, how can you behave that way? There's a reason why people do behave that way, even if they're wrong, even if they're totally wrong. There's a reason why people do behave this way. So he's saying the Meitzach is this midah of trying to understand that person, and therefore even when they behave in a very angry way, one is mamtik, one is sweetens the gevuros, both the gevuros in terms of your response, and you sweeten the gevuros in terms of their response, that they themselves will change. This is a pasuk in Mishlei, a famous pasuk in Mishlei. Manerach yashiv chema. Manerach, a soft answer turns away anger. Turns away anger. In fact, it's very interesting. I've had this experience myself. Sometimes people want to argue. They're there because they're so sure that you're going to say a certain thing that they hate, something about Torah, whatever it would be. And when they find that instead of dismissing their point, in which they're actually expecting that, and therefore they're ready to argue, they're ready to attack, when you say something like, you may be right, you may have a point, they don't know what to say at that point. You kind of stole their ammunition, stole their fire, and things can change. I remember I once had I was the last minute replacement. There was a very, very famous Jewish professor, I don't want to mention names, who was supposed to debate a very, very famous attorney. And the attorney was kind of on the frum side of things, and the Jewish law professor was on the non-frum side of things. And this was supposed to be a real, real debate. And the famous Jewish attorney couldn't make it at the last minute, so they had to go with me. I was like a last-minute replacement for this. And this Jewish law professor, he was prepared to attack Torah and mitzvahs. He really wanted to, attack. And he said all sorts of things. And at some point I said, well, some of what you say has some truth to it, and we need to address it. And he totally changed. He was not hostile. He became supportive. He even began to say, well, Torah does have a lot of good things too, and it changed. And this is mamish manerach yashiv chema. So when we talk about the expression softening gevura, it again has two references. I soften the gevuros within me that wants to retaliate, and that softens the gevuros within him that wants to attack. Right? This idea of being mamtik the gevuros, and that is connected to meitzach, that we shouldn't have azus meitzach, but the other way around, we should not be stubborn. We should not insist that I have to retaliate because somebody is yelling at me, therefore I have to yell back. Okay, we'll stop.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.